This Sunday is Pentecost Sunday, and when I mention Pentecost, what comes to mind for you? What is Pentecost Sunday to you? What do you think?
Happy birthday.
Flames of fire, happy birthday church, what else? Pentecost, what do you think of?
Wear red.
Wear red?
Yeah. Holy Spirit. Holy Spirit.
Holy Spirit. That's the thing we're going to hone in on tonight. What's that?
Many tongues.
Many tongues, tongues of fire, wind, flames, tongues of fire. People thinking the disciples were drunk. That came up in there. So, nothing's changed in the church. No, I'm just kidding. No. I wanted to, there's actually, to really appreciate and understand Pentecost, I'll really unpack it Sunday, probably much more in depth than what you're used to, because Pentecost, to me, is clearly a fulfillment of Old Testament prophecy, that when God talked to Jeremiah about taking the law that had been written on tablets and writing it on their hearts, I really think that was fulfilled at Pentecost. Because the holiday, we think of Pentecost as that moment when the Holy Spirit came in, and it was. But the disciples and all these people were there celebrating something completely different. And I'll back up in a moment to what that was, but let me get to why it's called Pentecost real quickly. You got to unpack a little bit of a chronological string here. Jesus was crucified on the Passover, and there was the festival of the Passover, and then 50 days later was Pentecost. It was 7 weeks in a day, and Pentecost was not called Pentecost. It may have been, that term was used by the Greeks around it, but what it was more commonly referred to by the Jews as was the Festival of Weeks. You had 7 sevens, you had 7 weeks, 49 days plus the Passover, that made 50 days. And it was the Festival of Weeks, and it was essentially a first fruits festival where you took the first grains that came from the field, the first offerings that you could make, and gave them to God, which represented a lot of trust, right? Because you didn't have the crop in yet. You were just getting the first gleanings. And anybody who's farmed knows that that's taken a lot of trust to take that first part of it and to give it away, because we can't count on what the yield's going to be until it's all in. And but the thing that I think that we miss that's so critical to understand is that it was also a remembrance of and a celebration of when God gave the law on Mount Sinai. So they remembered at that time the gift of the Torah, the gift of the law when God placed it on tablets. So I do not think at all that it was coincidental that the Holy Spirit, that gift was given on that day, because that's when the law was taken from being written on stone and being given to people. And when God gave us the gift of the Holy Spirit, He instilled the law within our hearts so that we would know. So I think it's really important we understand that Old Testament lineage going up to it. Now, I mentioned I have 9 days of homework. We'll get to that in just a moment. When I was growing up in the church, and I don't know what your experience was like, but I had very limited, very little direct teaching about the Holy Spirit really in our church. It was just sort of, it was kind of on the fringe, and I think Pentecost for us is even kind of a fringe holiday. We throw on red and we might have some balloons, but we really don't have meaningful significance to it, you know. But if we can tie it to the reality that God, what He had done in giving the law originally, that He's taking that law and He's impressing upon our hearts, I think that brings a lot more meaning to it. But it's also a fantastic time to learn about the Holy Spirit, which we kind of sideline, I think. I have this slide up here with this big letters Father on here, because one time, many years ago, it's probably 15 years ago, I was talking at a youth conference, And I said, if we tried to capture how we view the Trinity with fonts, I think that for Presbyterians, Father would be like Arial, 24-point, bold. That would be the font. It would be like that. Jesus Christ would be, for us, Times New Roman, 12-point, like what we just normally read in, And for Presbyterians, the Holy Spirit is microfont wingdings. So we're like, what in the world is the Holy Spirit? So that's what I grew up with. And when I hear, that, and is that kind of true to your experience a little bit? Maybe, maybe not. I don't know. It was for me until that shifted for me 11 years ago. And I was doing some study and some preparation. Pentecost was coming up, and I happened across some articles about Ascension Thursday, which I don't even think people even mention, or we don't really think about it or know anything about it. Sometimes in the Presbyterian Church, this past Sunday, some churches may have celebrated as Ascension Sunday. And it's called Ascension. There's Ascension Thursday or Ascension Sunday because if you go back and you recall the story of moving from the crucifixion to the resurrection, Jesus' ascension, or Jesus' time with disciples, ascension, and then ultimately the Holy Spirit, what we have is He's crucified on the Passover. He is resurrected on 3 days later. And then when He's resurrected, He spends 40 days with the disciples, right? And we have this period where they have Him once again in their midst. And at the end of 40 days, what does He do? He does a grand exit, right? He ascends, and they see Him ascend into heaven. And if you were to add up days, that would have fallen last Thursday in terms of chronology from when Easter took place. And so in some churches, in the Catholic Church for sure, and some other kind of high churches with hefty ecclesiology to them, they will observe Ascension Thursday. And as I was studying this, what I found out was that in some Catholic churches, between Ascension Thursday and Pentecost, they would have what's called a novena. Anybody ever hear that term? Our Catholic in the room has. A novena is it's 9 days of focused, dedicated prayer. You can actually do a novena focused around anything, but the most common by far is a novena to the Holy Spirit, and it's typically observed between Ascension Thursday and in preparation for Pentecost. That you have prayers that focus on the sevenfold Spirit, like 7 different aspects of the Spirit, and they sprinkle some other things in and stretch that out to have 9 days. And I ran into that and I thought, wow, that's kind of a cool, rich tradition. I didn't 100% see eye to eye with all the theology within each of the given prayers for the days that I read. And I thought, you know what? I'm going to write a Protestant novena to the Holy Spirit. And so what I did is I went into the sanctuary and I sat down and I lit a little candle and I had a simple refrain, "Come Holy Spirit, come," that I sung 9 times. I do it 9 times to just center myself, get focused, and then I read a passage about the Holy Spirit. I meditated on it for about 5 minutes, and then I wrote a reflection, and then I wrote a prayer. And when I got done with that, at the end of that 9 days, I had a very different understanding and a very different relationship with God through the Holy Spirit. And what I did was, after I did all of that, I recorded all that and I assembled it into a little guide. And I brought copies of that tonight. And I want to offer that to you as an exercise that you can do If you want, you don't have to take one. I'll pass it around. You can take it, decide whether you want to hang on to it or not. But when you get a hold of this, what you're going to find, there's a little introduction that tells you basically what I just talked about just now, minus the Old Testament tie-in stuff. You even get a little microphone wingdings in there, which, to make it even better, for some reason my printer only copied half the letters. Even the Presbyterian printer didn't understand. Couldn't even print it. So,
Don't like wingdings.
yeah, it was like, I'll give you half those wingdings. So they make just as much sense. And it's funny, I got different wingdings in here than I got there, though. I don't know why it worked that way. But once you get past that little introduction, which is for the most part what I shared with you just now, and there's a little bit of preface, you'll find a big heading. This is day 1, and the topic on day 1, Spirit of Truth. And you'll find a verse, then a meditation, and the meditation is what I wrote after I sat there with that text, and then a prayer. Now the thing that I've added is you'll notice there's space there for you to be able to write your own prayer. And if you've never done that, if you've never read someone else's prayer and then sort of write your own prayer inspired by or following the model of what you just read, that's a very helpful experience. One of my absolute favorite devotional guides, and I should share this some evening, I've got a bunch of them, is a little book called A Diary of Private Prayer. Has anybody heard of A Diary of Private Prayer by John Bailey? I love this book. And what it is it is a morning prayer and an evening prayer. I think there's 30 or 31 of them. But there is a blank page across from each one. And what's intended is that you read John Bailey's morning prayer and then you write your own prayer. And I've been through that little book many, many times. I got one years ago, I think early college, maybe even high school. And whenever I can find one and put my hands on it, I grab one. And I learned and I grew so much in prayer because John Bailey, first off, he's just an amazing man of prayer. Some people pray and you're like, how do you think where does all that come from? Well, I know where it comes from. The Holy Spirit's, leading the guy. But I just said, some people you pray and you're like, oh my gosh, your prayer life is so rich. The language, the breadth of it, the depth of the things you pray. And I found that reading John Bailey's prayer, it stretched me to pray about things that I just either wouldn't think to pray about, or he prayed about them in ways that I probably wouldn't have approached it. I had a moment like that last night. Belinda prayed for me last night after yoga, and she prayed about our house. And you all are welcome. This almost became a teneva, or what are not a novena, but a teneviva. Yeah, that's probably like I don't know what that is. But anyways, I almost added a day for you all to pray about our house. But we had an open house, no offer, and I'm just like, oh, you got to be kidding me. But when Belinda prayed about that, she prayed in a way that I had never thought to pray about this thing. And I'm sure it was inspired and it moved something in me. She was basically saying, and I hope you don't mind me sharing this, but she was basically saying, God, there's somebody that needs this house. May they find it. And I'm like, oh my gosh, it's all been about me. It's all been about, God, if I write one more check, I'm gonna be taking food out of the manger in the sanctuary or something here. This house needs to go. And I never thought about praying for the fact that there is a family or someone out there that they have a need for a house, and this could be the perfect house for them. And I thought, that's just a very different level of prayer around it. And so that was a concrete example, once again, where I got exposed to praying for something that I might pray about, but somebody took a 100% completely different tact toward it, and I grew from that, and it was meaningful for me. So my intention there, I don't think I'm near as eloquent as is John Bailey, and I wasn't as eloquent as Belinda last night, but that my intention here is that hopefully my prayer at least approaches the topic in a way that's going to push you to think and pray in ways that you may not otherwise do it. So that's the idea behind it. I find reading and following someone's prayer and then trying to pray about that in my own way is very helpful. I also have found that writing prayers is a different experience than just doing them in your head. There's something about it. Like, I'll just leave it at that and let you experience it. So I would really encourage you that, you looked at how long these are. That takes 5 minutes to read the text. I would encourage you to dedicate 5 or 10 minutes for the next 9 days. I'm going to have these available on Sunday as well for anybody who missed out. My thought was that I'll probably start on, because we missed Ascension Thursday. Not that I don't think that would have mattered really to us, but we missed that normative window. I was going to start on Pentecost Sunday. If I were you, though, I'd probably just go ahead and start tonight. If not, lay it somewhere where you see it tomorrow, because I think it'd be very, very easy to go home with all the best intentions, and when you wait 3 days to do it, totally forget to do it. It's just human nature. So, and I'm not sure that God's going to be offended by you praying sooner than later. In fact, I'm pretty sure that if you start praying now, that's probably a better thing, But I'm gonna make these available Sunday, and I'll also make it available digitally in case you want to share it with somebody. You might want to share this. I'll put a link on the website where people can download it and that kind of thing. So that's it. I'm gonna leave it at that. Do you have any questions? But I really would encourage you to do this. It's hard for me to put to words. It made a qualitative difference in my understanding and my experience of the Holy Spirit. Not that the Holy Spirit is any less mysterious to me. In fact, I think the more I learn about the Holy Spirit, the more the mystery of it becomes a reality, if that makes any sense. But that's what we got tonight, and I'm going to leave it at that and wrap us up with a song. So, and I hope that's an enriching experience.